The Tale of the Driftwood. A short story by J.G. Jose. I was once descended from a mighty silver birch tree that adorned the banks of the ancient Senku. I belonged to a family, which you may call a forest, of silver birches that proudly witnessed the cycle of life and the change of seasons. As a branch of this beautiful tree, I stretched out my fingers, my twigs and branches, towards the heavens and the brilliant stars, singing glory to my Creator each day that passed, each season and each year of my benign existence. All these years, I relished the presence of the visiting owls and other singing birds on my arms, my branches, as they kept me company in the warm balmy days as well as the cool breezy evenings. One day, a lightning struck and tore me off the trunk of the silver birch. In a sudden gust of wind, I fell into the ground and was separated forever from my tree. A heavy downpour ensued and gradually I was washed onto the banks of the river. Amidst the shock of my sudden disunion, I began to float into uncertainty, into an unknown essence. As I drifted along the Senku, I asked myself, will I drown? Will I perish? What about the silver birch from which I came from? Will it miss my absence? Thoughts rolled out. The water was cold and I was entirely soaked. I never knew I could float and swim on the mighty Senku. Hence began my journey. The Senku was an extremely long river, I heard from the other silver birches. It stretched beyond the valley from where I used to sit, way beyond the mountains that obscured my view, and beneath my limited horizon. So, I drifted for days. But the river water drenched me though it kept me alive. It was a splendid feeling to float along with the tides. One day I was on one side of the river, and then I was tossed, then tumbled onto the other side. I drifted on. Sometimes, I wondered if I will ever see my old silver birch again and realized, I am now on my own, in a brave new world beyond my control. Until one day, I was washed by the tides and got stuck by the banks of the Senku, many miles from home. It was a sultry dry day, I recall. I laid there to dry myself under the sweltering African sun. Again the thought entered me and asked, will I survive, will I die? Out of nowhere, suddenly, a mighty handsome bird, which they call an eagle, swooped down and grabbed me by its sharp claws. I thought it would be my end. But we soared up in the air and it was a magnificent feeling. And we landed on the top of a gigantic tree. He was building a nest for his kin. I was woven into the other branches. It was a great feeling again to feel the warmth of other twigs and branches. We awaited the arrival of his partner. That bright moonlit night, I found myself atop another mighty tree again, basking in awe at the beauty of the stars and the cosmic realm. It was a wonderful feeling to point up to the heavens again. I no longer drifted in the Senku, but became part of an unfolding miracle of life. That night, the mother eagle laid a few eggs. In the nest, I gave them a home, a shelter, a sanctuary, as I did before to the passing owls and the singing birds. As weeks passed, several chicks emerged from their shells. In the following months, I witnessed them evolve into eaglets, and later into strong beautiful avian beings. I felt heartened. I gave them shelter and a sanctuary. I kept them from falling off, and saw the wonder of the budding life unfold right above me. I held them up, and I saw them soar high in the sky. It was inspiring to see them grow and reach for the heavens. It felt as if I was part of their lives, their life's journey. What an inspiring bliss to have played a role and witness their beautiful wings unfold. One day, the family left me and the other branches. The nest was empty. We became lonely and uncherished. We slowly dried up as the seasons passed. We truly missed our eaglets. They had moved on to their new nests, and never came back. I could also feel my bones and fibers ache as time elapsed. Perhaps I will lie up here to dry and pass away into oblivion. But the memory of the eagles made me feel good. Until one morning, by a sudden blow of a falling branch above us, the nest came crashing down the ground. I felt just like this before when the lightning struck many years ago. This time, I was not perturbed. Experience, it was called. Then, the days passed, and ants crawled over me. Leaves covered me, but rain washed me anew and kept me moist. I was still alive. And I wondered, what will become of me now? The driftwood that traveled the length of the mighty Senku. Summer arrived. I still laid on the ground. I became drier, and even drier. My skin, my buck, turned from what used to be silver white in my early days to bronze. I could feel the rot set in. Until one afternoon, I heard footsteps of some two-legged creatures approaching. By now the leaves have been blown away, and they saw me much as the eagle that plucked me from the ground ages ago. A man and his son approached. The curious little boy held me up and showed my shiny bronze bark to his father. He nodded approvingly. I was still straight and a full 2 feet long. His father took me and shoved me into his sack along with other fallen branches. It was a rather long hike back to their village. Dusk had set in. I could smell burning wood nearby as they prepared the braai for the night. One by one, my fellow branches were tossed into the flame. But the young boy, whom the father called Little Daniel, grabbed me and set me aside. He playfully tossed me into the air and hit me with another stick, until I landed broken into 2 pieces, one longer than the other. His father summoned him to bring the longer piece to fuel the fire. My longer self joined the rest of the branches that helped cook their meal that night. Just as I provided the eagles a home, a shelter and a sanctuary, that night I provided them the fire. I pondered, was that my end? However, little Daniel slipped my shorter half into his pocket for keepsake. Somehow a part of me had survived. That same night, he stored me in a wooden glass cabinet in his warm cozy abode. He kept me there with his baby books and coins and pens and his little globe. In my company too were his headphone, his mini trophies, his little leprechaun doll, and his empty diary. And many years passed and little Daniel grew up to be a fine young man. He left for school for a few years and eventually returned home. One day he inspected his bookcase and found me stacked in a corner right beside his leprechaun named Tiny Tim. He started tossing some of his old stuff into the bin, and lifted me. However, he gently laid me down his desk beside a long slender filament that he used for writing. And into my tiny hollow cavity on one end, he inserted the thin tube and turned me into a wonderful new pen. Beside me laid his empty diary which he began to fill that night. As he burned the midnight oil, I kept him in quiet company while I rested upon his warm gliding fingertips. I discovered the life of this bright lad unfold. And the wondrous chapters he has lived. Much as I had seen the eaglets soar strongly up in the sky, I witnessed this boy grow, his pains, his struggles, his triumphs, his accomplishment, his dreams and aspirations revealed. And from the remains of this old brittle driftwood, he scribbled down the inspiring story of a young man's flight. The end.